Hello everybody, welcome back. It's me, Mr. Startin here, ready for your lesson 3 on plants. So hope you enjoyed the last lesson, taking the flower apart and looking inside it. We're going to refer back to that a little bit today. But today we're going to look more at what a plant and actually anything needs in order to be alive. So I'm just going to share with you our PowerPoint again. So just bear with me 1 minute. There we go. Okay, let's just make that nice and big. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to start off with a bit of a recap from the last 2 lessons. So first of all, we have got a food chain here, and I know I said about it being more complex and a food web being more interesting. You can have a go at filling in the food web instead if you want. But what would you put in this food chain? Pause the video and draw a quick food chain for me. Okay. So hopefully for the producer, you put something that was plant-based, so grass, leaves, flowers perhaps. If you know an animal in your research, you found that a certain animal eats certain plants. Primary consumer, what did you put there? Yep, hopefully you put a herbivore, something that eats vegetation. So we had a zebra in the example that I used in the first lesson. You could always have a cow, you could have even a panda because they eat bamboo, for example. That might have been your producer. And then for the secondary consumer, yes, you hopefully would have found a carnivore, something that eats other animals. Now, you could have had birds, you could have had, like we had in the first lesson, a lion, something that basically eats other animals and relies on that to find its energy. Okay, and just remembering keywords there as well. You could have used words such as prey and predator, herbivore, carnivore, and hopefully you've remembered that humans, we are omnivores. We eat both animals and vegetation. Okay, so going back to our last lesson, I really enjoyed that. Hopefully you did as well. Can you remember what the jobs of these parts of the flower were? Pause the video, just say them out loud. Okay. Good memory, well done. So I'm gonna have to check my notes a little bit to remember. So we have the male parts. Can you remember which parts of the flower are the male parts? That's right, the anther and the filament. Okay, they're the male reproductive organs. How about the female parts? Yes, the stigma, the style, and the ovary. And you've got the ovule that are inside the ovary there as well, all part of the female reproductive part of the plant. Can you remember what the job of the petal was? They look very nice, don't they, petals? I wonder why they look nice. Well done if you have said to attract insects and animals, because that is exactly their job. And insects and animals are very key to some plants in terms of their ability to reproduce and to have offspring. Okay, so let's have a look at what you're going to need today. So for today, you are going to simply just need a pencil and a piece of paper, because today's lesson is all about some keywords. Now, you may guess what our lesson's going to be about as these go on. So we've got movement, respiration, sensitivity. Some of you are already shouting. I can tell you already know from previous learning what I'm about to say. Growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. Now there's an extra one at the end here, but it's not part of our main part of the lesson, but photosynthesis, very important word when it comes to plants and learning about the way that they create their food. But those first 7 words, if you look at the first letter of each word, they put them all together. What does it spell? What does it spell? You know what? I can hear some of you shouting at it at your laptops. It does spell Mrs. Gren, and I'm sure you have looked at Mrs. Gren before. Mrs. Gren is the way that we remember what animals and plants need for life. Everything in life needs these first 7 words: movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. So Mrs. Gren is our way of remembering that. So let's have a look at the wolf. Okay, easiest way to remember this, I'm just going to move myself a little bit there. We've got movement. Well, obviously a wolf moves around. Respiration, do you know what that means? Breathing, yeah. And as we know, animals and plants need to be able to breathe in order to survive. We are breathing all the time. Our wolf will be breathing. You could see its breath on a cold winter's day when it's out hunting. You need oxygen in order to live. And that goes the same for fish, insects, and like I said, plants. Everything which has life needs respiration. Sensitivity, that's the ability to feel things, okay? I'm not talking necessarily in terms of your emotions there. I'm talking about your touch, okay? So a wolf, for example, uses its keen sense of smell, its sensitivity to smell in order to hunt. But it also have sensitivity for pain as well. It needs to be able to respond to its surroundings, and that's what sensitivity is. Growth, the wolf doesn't come out of its mother's tummy all grown already, does it? It grows from a pup all the way to a full-grown adult wolf. Reproduction, that's the ability for the animal to have young, so to be able to have its own puppies later on. And animals, plants do that in different ways. And indeed, we have some which have eggs, we have some which are live young in terms of animals. And then for the plants, you can have a think about how that works with plants later on. Excretion. Now, I'm sure you know what that means, but just to be clear, that's where how we get rid of our waste. So for animals, that's obviously through urinating and feces. So in other words, going to the toilet. You need to be able to get rid of waste. I can hear a lot of you giggling there, but it's important for life. We need to be able to get rid of waste and things that our bodies don't need once we have consumed our nutrition, which is our last word. Our nutrition is where we get our energy, where we get our nutrients from. It's our food and water, essentially, what we need, as you know, to survive. I'm sure you obviously have lots of nutritional food at home. The wolf obviously will get its nutrition through its prey, using that key word again, that it hunts. Okay, but what about for flowers and, well, not flowers, plants? I'm just starting naughty there. Plants, okay. How do you think this works for plants? Pause the video and write down how you think it works. Okay, we're going to have a look, see how this works. So, movement. Now, movement, you may not think of plants as really moving that much. Some plants do. Sunflowers, if any of you have grown those, will notice that sunflowers turn to face the sun, hence the name sunflower. The leaves and your stems, they grow towards light and temperature. And we're going to be doing a few investigations of that in a few weeks to see how that works. And obviously, the roots also grow with gravity. They grow towards the inside the ground, down. So through growth, they move. But you get some, which we call nastic movements, which respond more to their surroundings. Daisies open and close at certain times of the day in order to get light. And when they're around plants, some can close around the plant, something they touch. So the ivy on this page, for example, you would probably have seen ivy grows up and around the fence and seems to be just crawling all over the place. It's moving. It's gradually moving. We can't see that movement, but it is moving. One more spectacular type of movement, though, is the Venus flytrap. Now, if you have never seen a Venus flytrap, go have a look on the internet at some examples. It's brilliant. The Venus flytrap waits for an insect to arrive on normally a little flower that it's got growing inside it, and then it quickly closes around it and consumes that insect. It snaps it. So that is an example of a more spectacular movement from a plant. For the respiration, plants can't breathe in the same way as that animals do, but they still need oxygen, which is a gas, in order to help create energy for its other purposes. They take that oxygen in through the leaves and then release the energy for food. This gives away carbon dioxide. Now, often you'll hear about plants taking in carbon dioxide. We'll get onto that when we get to photosynthesis. But they also need oxygen in order to be able to breathe for key parts of their energy production. For sensitivity, plants are sensitive to temperature, light, and gravity. And we'll move towards these a little bit, like I said, with the movement. If it's too hot, they are sensitive to that. If it's too light, if it's too dark, sensitive to that, they'll grow towards the light. And obviously we talked about the roots with the growing downwards. So for growth, we know that plants grow. You plant seed, bean in the ground, and that will grow over time. And it will grow throughout its entire life. For reproduction, and we talked about the male and the female parts of the flower, most plants produce seeds. These seeds are made when one plant produces pollen, which travels to another plant at the same time. These then mix, and the plant then scatters its seeds to produce new plants. And we'll get into much more detail about this in a later lesson, but it's important to know that plants do reproduce, and the seeds are a product of that reproduction. Excretion, yes, plants do indeed excrete as well, but not in the same way that animals do. There's no urine, there's no feces, there's no going to the toilet. Plants produce waste by releasing gases in their tiny holes in their leaves. You wouldn't have thought about it then, but when you look at a plant, and maybe you've got one right next to you at the moment, if through its leaves it's producing gases all the time, it's getting rid of its waste, what it doesn't need. In the same way that humans, animals get rid of their waste by going to the toilet. And then the last one is nutrition. And amazingly, most plants make their own food through the energy of the sun, carbon dioxide in the air, and the water from the soil. And this is called photosynthesis. Now, we'll do an entire lesson on photosynthesis later on, but this is how plants get their nutrition. It's not in the same way as animals where they go and eat something. You can physically see them biting and consuming it. Plants are getting that all the time. They're almost constantly getting nutrition in. So that's why these three things are light, carbon dioxide, which is a gas, and water is important for them. Without any of these, they wouldn't be able to survive. Okay. Few questions for you now. So you can by all means go back in the video and have a look at these if it helps you, but I want you to answer these 7 questions. So have a look at the questions, pause the video, and answer those in your books. Okay, so hopefully you had a go at those and you had a look back at the video to see if you can get the answers. Let's see if they match up. So yes, the plant that spectacularly grabs insects is called a Venus flytrap. Plants need oxygen to breathe. They are sensitive to light, temperature, and gravity. They grow all their life, and when they reproduce, they produce seeds. They excrete through their leaves, and their nutrition the process is called photosynthesis. Right, now I'd like you to copy down this table now. So we've got Mrs. Grimm at the top. What I want you to do is in the table, write down the parts of the plant which are important for each of those elements of life. Pause the video, off you go. Okay, so let's see if it matched up with what I've got here. For movement, leaves and stem are important for movement because the leaves moves, the stem moves, but you could also have put in, for example, for daisies, you could put in the flower. For Venus flytrap, obviously you've got the head of the plant, but the top of the plant. The movement, you could argue it, all of it actually. For respiration, the leaves are very important. We talked about that. That's how they get their oxygen in. For sensitivity, the whole plant is sensitive to light, temperature, and gravity. For growth, again, the whole plant, it doesn't start off as a plant, does it? It grows from a seed and becomes bigger and bigger. So the whole plant will grow the entire of its life, the same way that humans, we continue growing up until a certain point. For reproduction, they need the flower, which we've talked about in the last lesson, seed, as that is what's produced, and the pollen that is produced in the flower. And you could have had any of those. You may have even gone further and been more detailed about the parts of the flower that it needs, and well done if you did. For excretion, like we said, the leaves are important again, and as are the leaves are important for nutrition, as well as the roots are important because that's how plants get their nutrition from the soil. They get the goods from the soil for that photosynthesis process. So well done if you got all of those, and you may have even put more in. You may have been so amazing at this that you've actually put even more detail in, and well done if you did. If you want to find out a bit more about Mr. Grimm process and what is a living thing, a great website to use, and this is what I use to help me with the lesson, is dkfindout.com. it's got on there different elements of how the Mrs. Gwen processes work for plants, and a few good videos and little graphics on there as well. So please do go use it. Okay, so can you remember what Mrs. Gwen stands for? I'm going to pause the video and have a think. So can you remember? So M, that was for movement, moving around, being able to move. R, respiration, which means breathing. S, sensitivity, be the feel. Growth, growth. I just said it, didn't I? Growth. G is for growth. So the ability to be able to grow throughout your life. It needs to happen. We don't start the way that we finish as adults. R, reproduction. Yes, that how animals are able to have offspring. E, I'm sure you remember E. It's the funny one, isn't it? It's excretion, how you get rid of your waste. And N, nutrition. Yeah, it's what we eat, what we consume, water and food. Okay, so that's the end of our lesson today. For next lesson, we're going to talk about what does a plant need to live in more detail. What you're going to need for this is some paper, pencils, and if you can get them, it will be so good if you can get a seed or a bean. Make sure it's not a baked bean, something that's already been cooked or changed in some way, but just a bean, like a runner bean would be really good. And we're going to have a bit of an investigation. So that's it for today. Have a good rest of your day, and I will see you in the next lesson.